They laughed at his old boots, downgraded his seat, and whispered behind his back. Too bad they didn't recognize the man who owned the airline. Or the button he was about to press. The terminal at JFK was buzzing like a luxury showroom with a boarding gate. Announcements echoed through high glass ceilings. Sleek espresso cups clinked. Designer heels tapped over polished floors. Nobody noticed the man in the dark navy canvas jacket and scuffed boots. And that's exactly how he wanted it. Keanu Charles walked with unhurried steps and a low, grounded energy that made space bend around him without sound. A leather satchel hung from his shoulder, faded jeans, a threadbare t-shirt. He looked like a guy catching a red-eye after a canceled conference. No one stared. And yet, something about him didn't sit right with the luxury crowd. Too still, too quiet. He held a first-class boarding pass for Atlantic Air Flight 447 to Zurich. Seat 1A, the ticket said. K. Charles, no frills, no recognition. The gate agent, Sarah, according to her badge, didn't look up when she scanned it. All the way up, she muttered. Keanu nodded. No smile, no small talk. He stepped onto the jet bridge and disappeared into the warm amber of the aircraft. Gold-toned lighting, mahogany panels. The scent of champagne barely masked by citrus cleaning polish. Welcome to luxury airspace, designed for hedge fund titans and second-tier royalty. He moved toward 1A and stopped. Someone was already there. A silver-haired man in his 50s, pale, sharp cheekboned, grinning into his champagne glass, legs stretched across the aisle like he owned the air. That was Grant Langford, and if Keanu remembered right, he was the same guy who once declared on a Bloomberg panel that diversity is branding, not business. Keanu double-checked his pass. Still said 1A. So he turned to the nearest attendant, a tall blonde woman with a strained smile named Natalie Greer. "Excuse me," he said softly, "but that's my seat." Natalie blinked at him, eyes doing a full up-down scan like a security system. "Sir, I'm going to need you to step aside for a moment," she said in that icy, smooth tone flight attendants use when they've already decided who's wrong. "That seat's been reassigned. We had a last-minute change." She didn't ask his name, didn't look at his boarding pass, just gestured toward business class and added, "We've upgraded someone from our platinum legacy list. We hope you understand." Keanu didn't nod, didn't argue, just tilted his head. "I wasn't notified. It's not always something we can control," she said. "Apparently," Keanu replied. She offered him a seat in row 17C. Not economy, but not 1A either. He glanced once at Langford, who didn't even look up, and quietly made his way to the back. No fuss, no drama. But a storm was already forming. Seat 17C was near the galley. Less legroom, closer to crying babies, tucked right into that space where corporate courtesy fades into tolerated inconvenience. Keanu slid in without a word. Other passengers glanced his way, then away. He heard them murmur, maybe points, maybe sweepstakes, probably not full fare. 2 rows up, a woman leaned to her husband and whispered, "They're letting anyone into business now." Her husband chuckled, probably used Amex rewards. None of it was new to Keanu. He'd walked through this line his entire life. But they had no idea who he really was, or what Clause 7C meant when quietly activated from 38,000 feet. At 38,000 feet, the real turbulence wasn't in the air, it was in the cabin. Keanu sat still in 17C, legs crossed, eyes down, but every breath around him seemed to sharpen. The whispers didn't stop. The assumptions didn't slow down. If anything, they multiplied. The woman across the aisle, traveling with her young son, gave Keanu a tight, knowing smile. The kind you share when you've been through this before. Her son leaned in and whispered loudly, "Is that Neo?" She hushed him gently. "Let people have their peace, baby." But she looked at Keanu again, and this time with a softness that held weight. Keanu returned the glance with a slight nod. 3 rows ahead, a middle-aged man in a linen blazer tapped away on his tablet and said to his wife without looking up, "That guy's not supposed to be here." She whispered back, "They've been handing out upgrades to just anyone lately." A flight attendant walked down the aisle offering drinks. She passed Keanu without stopping. The mother beside him noticed. "It's not just you," she muttered under her breath. He smiled faintly. "I know." Back in first class, Grant Langford was still lounging, swirling his 3rd glass of champagne. He chuckled, loud enough for those nearby to hear. They should really screen who they let on these flights. First class used to mean something. The woman seated beside him gave an awkward laugh, clearly uncomfortable but unwilling to speak up. Near the galley, a young flight attendant named Evan glanced at the seating manifest on his tablet. His brows knit. "Row 17C," he mumbled. He tapped once, then twice. A red flag appeared next to the name. "Operational oversight, do not override." He blinked, stared again. The name matched. K. Charles. His eyes widened. Just as he was about to speak, a soft alert pinged through the internal cabin system, one only visible to crew leads and flight ops managers. It was subtle. A shift. A new protocol entry that hadn't been there when they took off. Clause 7, C, active. No one said anything. But beneath the surface, the airplane's ecosystem shifted like tectonic plates under pressure. From Zurich to Manhattan, systems quietly came alive. Screens blinked, protocol logs updated. Executives began receiving encrypted alerts marked Level Red. They didn't know the details, just that someone with authority had pulled a lever almost no one was supposed to touch mid-flight. Meanwhile, Keanu sat in 17C, flipping through the airline magazine without reading a word. A few seats back, a college student named Maya had been live tweeting the whole interaction since JFK. At first, it was jokes. They just kicked Keanu Reeves out of first class? But then came the replies. Thousands of them. People weren't laughing, they were angry. The video she posted hit 400K views before they passed Nova Scotia. Within minutes, it crossed 1 million. In first class, Natalie Greer leaned toward Langford and whispered, "He didn't make a scene. That's the weird part." Langford shrugged. People like him know better. But not everyone agreed. Evan, still holding his tablet, took a deep breath and walked down the aisle. His fingers trembled slightly as he approached Keanu. He stopped, bent slightly. "Sir, just confirming, you're Mr. K. Charles?" Keanu looked up slowly. "Yes. Evan faltered. "There's a flag on the manifest. I didn't know." Keanu gave him a look that wasn't unkind. "You weren't supposed to." Then he tapped the side of his phone again. No one saw the interface. No one heard the command. But across the ocean, at Volta Capital's Zurich office, an operations director sat up straighter. A blinking icon now showed full activation, Clause 7C, confirmed. Target, Atlantic Air. Trigger, ethical breach. Discriminatory protocol violation. Back in 17C, Keanu folded his magazine, set it aside, and stared straight ahead. The curtain to first class swayed slightly. The reckoning had begun. Somewhere over the Atlantic, the cabin dimmed for evening service. The mood was quiet, polished, curated. But under it all, tension pulsed. A subtle shift had begun, and the people who had whispered now grew oddly silent. Evan retreated to the galley, sweat beginning to bead under his collar. He stared at his tablet. The red banner was still blinking. Clause 7C, verified stakeholder override. He whispered to Natalie, "We need to double-check the manifest." Natalie barely glanced up. "If it's about 17C, I handled it." "No," Evan said, voice firmer. "I think you didn't." "Ah." Natalie rolled her eyes. He looked like a lost tourist, probably used a friend's miles. "His name is flagged by Zurich," Evan said. Natalie finally froze. She turned, eyes locked on his screen. And there it was. K, Charles, level red, clearance. Her jaw clenched. "That can't be right." "It is," Evan said. "And you moved him without verifying his name." Panic flickered behind her eyes. "He didn't say anything, he just let it happen." "Exactly," Evan whispered. "And that's what scares me." In the first-class cabin, Grant Langford was still droning on to anyone who'd listen. "We're watering down the premium experience. You let diversity dictate policies, and this is what you get. No standards, just optics." His voice carried. The same people who chuckled before were now glancing nervously toward the curtain. From the back of the plane, Keanu still hadn't moved. In a boardroom in Manhattan, two executives at Atlantic Air were trying to interpret the Zurich trigger. "Clause 7C has never been used mid-flight," one said. "Until now," the other replied. "Pull his identity file." A moment later, the room fell into stunned silence. "Oh my God. That's Keanu Charles Reeves. Silent acquisition. Volta Capital. Elysian Tables. Owns 48% of this airline. And we downgraded him to row 17. On board, Maya's video had hit 3.1 million views. Comments flooded in. Screenshots of Keanu's face. This man owns the airline. They moved a billionaire to business class? The quietest power move ever, caught on camera. Natalie returned to first class looking pale. She whispered something to Bryce, the flight manager. He turned white. Then he looked toward 17C, like he'd seen a ghost. Natalie said, "What do we do?" Bryce replied, "Pray Zurich doesn't send a recall before we land." But it was already too late for prayers. Keanu tapped his phone once more. This time a new interface appeared. Two options. Pause engagement / proceed with full breach protocol. He selected the second. Volta Capital's secure servers launched a liquidation order. $500 million, 0 cents in stock. Gone in under 90 seconds. Bloomberg pushed an alert. CNBC followed. Atlantic Air shares plunge amid anonymous insider shakeup. Back in 17C, Keanu leaned his head against the seat. His eyes closed. He wasn't angry. He wasn't vengeful. He was just done watching the same cycle repeat. Judged by clothes. Judged by silence. Judged by skin. He hadn't come on this flight to test anyone. But when they tested him, they failed. The boy across the aisle peeked over again. This time, Keanu gave him a small smile, then looked away. The final blow came quietly. An encrypted call was placed from Zurich to the cockpit. Captain Harris received the message directly. "Mr. Charles is to be treated as principal authority on board." He stepped out of the cockpit, walked calmly past first class, through the curtain, and approached Keanu. "Mr. Charles," he said, voice steady, "Zurich has confirmed your standing. On behalf of Atlantic Air, I deeply apologize." Keanu opened his eyes. "No need," he said. "The system already apologized for you." Harris blinked. "Is there anything I can do?" Keanu nodded. "Land the plane." And then, for the first time, everyone in the business cabin turned to look at him. The silence was no longer awkward. It was reverent. The man they had judged had just judged them back. And the weight of that judgment would follow them long after wheels touched down. In Zurich, the curtain parted. Bryce, the flight manager, stepped through like a man walking into a courtroom. His face had lost all color, and his hands were locked tight behind his back. He approached Keanu's seat with the posture of someone delivering bad news to a judge. "Mr. Charles," he said, barely audible, "we've been informed of your position, and I want to extend our sincerest apologies." Keanu didn't stand. He didn't even blink. "You're not here to apologize," he said. "You're here to contain a mess." Bryce swallowed hard. "We'd like to restore your original seating in first class immediately." Keanu finally looked up. "I think I'll walk." Bryce stepped aside. The aisle was silent. As Keanu rose from 17C, every head turned. The same passengers who had rolled their eyes, whispered, chuckled behind screens, they now held their breath. He walked past them like a shadow, slicing through pretense. Not a word, not a glare, just the weight of someone who didn't need to demand respect. He already had it. When Keanu stepped back into first class, Natalie flinched. She was standing by the galley, pretending to wipe down a tray, but the cloth shook in her hand. "Mr. Charles," she began, but her voice cracked. Keanu held up a hand. "Don't." Behind her, Grant Langford remained sprawled in 1A, completely unaware. "What now?" he muttered, glancing at Keanu like he was a stubborn waiter. Keanu walked toward him slowly, each step deliberate. The mood shifted. Langford scoffed. "Look, man, I don't know what this is, but You don't need to know," Keanu said quietly. Then he reached into his jacket and pulled out a black card. Matte finish, platinum edge, no name, only the Volta Capital crest. Langford blinked. "Is that supposed to mean—" "It means," Keanu interrupted, "you're in my seat." Silence fell like a dropped curtain. Langford's smirk dissolved. He stood slowly, but not before muttering, "Bet you're enjoying this, huh?" Keanu stepped closer, his voice even lower. "Enjoyment would require surprise. But this is exactly what I expected from people like you." Langford glanced around, now aware of the eyes on him, and straightened his collar. "This is about race, isn't it?" "No," Keanu said. "It's about character. And you came up short." Langford exited the aisle like a man evicted from his own ego. Keanu sat down in 1A, adjusted the seatbelt, exhaled once. Natalie stood nearby, paralyzed. "I didn't know," she whispered. "You didn't check," Keanu replied. "That's worse." She nodded, eyes glassy. Moments later, her crew tablet buzzed. "Internal memo, employee oversight. Natalie Greer, immediate suspension pending review." She stared at the screen like it was a verdict. Bryce's tablet pinged too. "Flight manager under ethics audit, do not deplane without clearance." Keanu turned to Bryce. "Tell Zurich they've got 36 hours. Full compliance audit. I want transcripts. And footage. Gate to galley." Bryce paled. "That's not standard protocol." "It is now," Keanu said. "Unless you'd prefer this plane land without a logo." Back in economy, someone gasped. Maya had just uploaded a second video, the title, "He Owns Everything, and They Tried to Humiliate Him." It hit 2 million views before Keanu reclined his seat. But the real explosion came from the live stream. Somehow, Maya's feed had been picked up by a travel blogger with 10 million subscribers. Within minutes, clips of Keanu walking back to 1A were being stitched, shared, captioned. "When quiet is power. They thought he was nobody. Clause 7C, look it up." In Zurich, the boardroom at Atlantic Air HQ lit up with panic. Executives scrambled, calls flooded legal, HR, and investor relations. The CEO, watching from a private jet, simply said, "We're done." Langford, now sitting in the crew jump seat after refusing a downgrade to business, stared into nothing. His phone buzzed. Board suspensions, fund withdrawals, his name trending, for all the wrong reasons. Keanu didn't celebrate, he didn't gloat. He just stared out the window into the dark sky as a flight attendant placed a new drink on the tray beside him, this time without hesitation. "Mr. Charles," she said, steady and respectful, "is there anything else you need?" Keanu turned slightly. "Yes," he said. "Accountability. Let it reach the ground before we..." Somewhere over the Alps, Flight 447 cut through the clouds like a verdict through silence. First class had gone quiet. Not with luxury, but with guilt. No more champagne flutes clinking, no more whispered laughter, just the weight of knowing they'd judged a man who never raised his voice, yet shook an entire system. Evan stood in the galley staring at his own reflection in the polished chrome. He'd been part of it. Not directly, but silence was participation. He thought about what Keanu had said. Not in words, but in presence. Without yelling, without demanding. A lesson etched deeper than any training manual ever could. He walked back to seat 1A, stopped just beside Keanu. "I just wanted to say," Evan said, voice low, "I'm sorry." Keanu turned his head slowly. "You weren't the problem," he said. "But now you know." Evan swallowed hard. "So, what do I do with that?" Keanu's reply was calm, almost fatherly. "Next time someone's being ignored, don't." Behind him, Natalie sat on the crew jump seat, eyes empty, her tablet still glowing with disciplinary flags. She didn't cry. She didn't argue. Because deep down, she knew this wasn't just about today. It was about every day she had let prejudice hide behind policy and never questioned it. The captain's voice came over the intercom. "Ladies and gentlemen, we'll be landing shortly in Zurich. Please return to your seats and fasten your seatbelts." In Zurich, the runway had already cleared an exclusive path. Not for royalty, not for heads of state. For accountability. When the plane touched down, there was no applause, just the soft click of belts unfastening and eyes avoiding eye contact. Security came on board, not for Keanu, but for Bryce, Langford, and Natalie. Internal Affairs was waiting at the jet bridge, flanked by 2 agents from Volta Compliance Division. No handcuffs, just consequences. As Keanu rose from his seat, the woman from Economy with the little boy stepped forward. She didn't say anything. She just looked at him like someone who had been seen. Really seen. He gave her the slightest nod before exiting. Outside the aircraft, cameras had already gathered. Not paparazzi, but press outlets, who had caught wind of the trending storm mid-flight. But Keanu didn't stop for interviews. He didn't issue a statement. Instead, he stepped into a waiting black car, windows tinted, no logo. A message sent in silence. 3 days later, a handwritten letter appeared online, signed Evan T. The Cost of Silence. In it, he pledged 3 months' salary to a non-profit fighting workplace discrimination. Not as a grand gesture, but as a start. The final line read, "Silence has a cost. I paid mine. Now it's your turn." Volta Capital quietly matched the donation 20-fold. Natalie never returned to the skies, but last anyone heard, she was volunteering at a crisis center for displaced workers. Langford disappeared from public view entirely. One rumor claimed he moved to a remote ranch in Montana. Another said he was writing a book called The Cost of Ego. No one really cared. But the airline changed. Atlantic Air installed a protocol audit team. Customer service training was revamped from the ground up. Clause 7C became legend in corporate ethics manuals. And Keanu? He never tweeted, never gave a TED talk. He simply kept flying, seat 1A or 17C. It didn't matter, because his power wasn't in position. It was in principle. Somewhere out there, another plane lifts into the sky. Someone is being misjudged. Someone is being ignored. And maybe this time someone will notice. Because the man who brought a billion-dollar company to its knees never raised his voice. He just reminded the world how much louder dignity speaks when no one expects it to. Yeah, you've just witnessed a story that didn't start with a hero. It started with a quiet man in scuffed boots. He didn't storm the gates. He didn't scream. He didn't threaten. He simply watched, endured, and waited. Until the moment the system exposed itself. So now ask yourself, if you had been on that flight, where would you have stood? With the ones who judged by appearance? Or with the one who listened without speaking? Because every day someone is pushed to the back of the plane. Every day someone is overlooked, ignored, reassigned, dismissed, because of how they dress, how they look, how they don't fit. But sometimes that person turns out to be the storm. Keanu didn't reclaim a seat. He reclaimed the definition of power. Not through volume, but through value. Not through confrontation, but through calibration. Every choice he made was precise. Every silence a scalpel. Every word a reckoning. And the most powerful part? He never told them who he was. He let their behavior write the story for him. What if that were you? What if your moment comes, not with cameras flashing or names dropping, but with a quiet decision? To speak up, to step aside, or to stay silent. This wasn't about revenge. This was about responsibility. It was about restoring what we've let erode in boardrooms, airplanes, and everyday interactions. The basic act of looking someone in the eye and seeing them fully. So, if you felt something watching this, hold on to it. If it made you angry, good. Anger wakes us up. If it made you reflect, better. Reflection changes us. And if it made you want to do something, anything, different tomorrow, then this story did its job. Because the man in 1A didn't ask for attention. He asked for accountability. Now it's your move. Share this story if you believe quiet integrity can be louder than power. Comment below. Tell us when you've seen it, lived it, or missed it. Let's talk about the moments where silence hurt more than shouting, and if you'd choose differently, next time. This isn't just a story. It's a mirror. And you? You're in it now. What will you do with it?